Welcome back to Between Sundays, the podcast where we're trying to figure out life where most of life happens. I'm Bobby.
I'm Justice.
And today we are talking about Easter and the day after and what all God has given us, maybe through church messages, whether through the worship services, maybe in our personal Bible study leading up to this time of year, and just the hope that we have as Christians today. So, exciting episode. One that we probably don't have as many notes on today, just kind of talking, but looking forward to what God has for us today. So, but we're coming off a spring break here. I don't know where it is for everybody else. I know we just come off of spring break. Well, I say today's the last day of spring break.
Yeah.
For TCA. So
you still got Monday.
Well,
but it is quickly coming to an end.
Yeah, I mean they got the day out. I mean, being Monday, they got today out.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, so all the teachers are.
I forget you're talking in future tense.
Yeah.
I'm retarded and I'm talking about right now. So that's where they caught me off.
Yeah, we're
today,
giving a little
as
preview.
In Monday morning at 6:30.
As in we're up at 6:30 right now. Nah. But yeah, I mean they got their 1 day left, and then they go back. I know. All the teachers are crying.
I know. So. My wife teaches kindergarten, and she has been enjoying her time off.
Oh, I bet so.
And working at the church, I have enjoyed every kid being gone because I don't have anything to clean up, or it's kind of a little quiet around here. But
yeah, when your maintenance or clean up for a facility and people's not there, it gives
nice.
It gives you a greater appreciation.
It's so nice, and then they come back, and then you have job security. So
yeah, that is true.
That
is true. So
it's a little give and take.
Yeah, did y'all do a little traveling for spring break?
We did. Went down to the beach for a few days. Hot and sandy.
You're not as much of a beach person.
I want to be. I want to be a beach person.
You've been giving it a lot better shot the last.
Oh, I have. I've been such a team player. but I'm not a beach person. I like the idea, but see, I hate glitter, and sand is just
natural glitter.
Glitter, and so we went down to a beach down in Georgetown, South Carolina, and spent a few days down there, and it was a ton of fun. But again, you get done, you're like, I'm the type of person that I have to get into the ocean, but then I get instantly scared I'm about to get attacked by something. So there was one day that there were some waves coming up, and I was like, I'm going to get the boogie board. So I get the boogie board, and I'm going out there, and my strap wrapped around my leg, and I was like, I'm done for today.
Done.
And I got out, and I didn't touch the water again, and then the next day I tried it, and nothing touched me. I was like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. So
didn't see no sharks, nothing like that?
We saw some,
any jellyfish?
Ashlyn proceeds to scream shark. It was 3 dolphins that were coming up, which was cool, but also not cool that she's screaming shark.
On a public beach.
But it was a good time. I enjoyed it. And y'all didn't go to the beach. Y'all went
We didn't get
opposite direction, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we went. Of course, we were the week before. We were in Kentucky, so we were up there at Ark and Creation Museum, taking our 9th grade for the school up there.
Good times.
Yeah, it was good. We had a good time. They're nuts.
Yep.
But no, it was a good time. They're interesting.
Shout out 9th grade class.
Yeah, shout out 9th grade TCA. They're an interesting class. But no, it was fun nonetheless. I mean, we did have a good time. And then when we got back, we were here for a few days, just kind of unwinding from the trip, all that good stuff. And then we actually went to go see Heather's family in Georgia, in Milledgeville, Georgia. So we went there for a couple days and just got to hang out with them, and then went right into a 2-day tournament baseball weekend with Asher. We literally got off the road from the highway straight to the ball field.
Yeah, no, it doesn't slow down very much around here.
No, it doesn't.
You can either jump off and then try to get back on somewhere else, but most of the time it's just kind of hang on.
Yeah. I mean, it was good. Like I said, it was a good time off. I mean, really in and out for the last couple of weeks. I mean, just being able to different things, but it was definitely still pretty busy with things.
And then you have Easter.
And then we got Easter. I was looking, man, it was good service.
It was
church. Very good service.
It was.
And we hope we really do. We hope everybody had great services where you were at, and that God was lifted up. And we know, of course, it's a big time of year where family members may come that hadn't been in a while, or friends, or things like that. So we do hope everybody had a great Easter. And again, kind of talking about today, I'll kind of let you set it up for today of just kind of the day after and what we do with all of it.
Yeah, no, so that's kind of what we were talking about as far as the topic for this week. And, I was talking in Sunday school, and I was like, I bet you I know what every preacher's preaching about today. And
the resurrection.
Yeah, so, but this is such a special week that we take time and really think about. But there's so much that goes into it. And I said that kind of in a joking way in Sunday school of like, I know what every preacher is going to be preaching on, but at the same time, we preach about it every year.
Yeah.
And we kind of go through it, and I think it can start getting a little repetitious, and we start, okay, well, we know what today's going to be about.
Yeah.
And nobody likes to verbalize what we're thinking, but we're all kind of thinking, this is the same thing as last year. And, we get the kids up, and we get them in their nice Sunday clothes, and we get dressed, and we go to church. That's what we do on Easter. And I think sometimes we can forget about the reality of Easter being, this wasn't a made up event. This isn't a fairy tale. This was something that truly happened. And kind of reeling, including me and you, kind of reeling everybody back in of saying, okay, what is not only the significance of Easter, but what was kind of the emotions and the reality of what was going on. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today is, not really having any notes, kind of going off of really what we've been thinking about, what we've been praying about. And I've taken time this week and really thought about, what all the cross endured, what all, and I know I kind of say this a lot, I feel like, but how many times did Jesus say, they're going to destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll build it back? And the disciples even look at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And nobody really realizes the significance of the cross, even, because Jesus is there praying, and he looks at him and says, can't you just pray with me for 1 hour?
Yeah.
And comes back and finds him asleep. And so nobody's really seeing the significance of what's playing out other than Christ, and really knowing what all he's about to be going through, beaten beyond recognition, the cat of nine tails, the cross, the beatings, the humiliation, everything that he was about to go through. And then not only to go through that, but to pay that price and then raise from the dead.
Yeah.
And still having those disciples that are following this man for years, and them start doubting, and them start, questioning what was really all of this. And I think we look at the disciples sometimes as people that are superhuman, and they do incredible acts of faith, and then other times we alienate them for a lack of faith or a disbelief. But if we're being honest, a lot of times that's what we are as Christians, just kind of this, this up and down of, I'm on the mountaintop and everything's going good, and, nothing can stop me.
Yeah.
And then other times where I'm in a valley and saying, nobody's here with me.
Yeah.
And really kind of getting into that day after of, what would you have done differently? If you were put in that position, what would the story look like if your name was there?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we want to get in today. Just really just the heart of Easter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does really amaze me, the people that, I'll say it like this, it's easy for us to read, of course, the accounts of the Gospels and everything that happened leading up to the cross and the days after, and being on this outside looking in of I would have done it this way or I would have done it that way, when truth be told, probably half of us would have done it worse than the disciples did.
Yep.
Rather than any better than what they would have done. I look at people before that want to preach on, like you said, a lack of faith in the Bible, like we've got it figured out.
Yeah.
No, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, talking about afterwards, you look at the disciples and just all the all those that followed Christ, all the emotions that they were going through. I mean, here's the thing. I today have never seen anybody rise from the grave, so I probably would doubt it too. You know, I mean, there's just all these things that can run through your mind of that, and really, it's that thing of looking at it nowadays and saying, okay, I can't change anything of what they've done. I can't change anything of how they reacted or this or that. But you know what I can do? I can make sure that I don't doubt today. I can make sure that I don't, get to a place of wondering, is this something worth sharing? Is it something worth living for? And that's really kind of some things that I've, kind of been looking at leading up to this week, and of course up to what our pastor's preached 2 great messages the last couple weeks, really. Around Easter and leading up to Easter. He said a phrase I'll never forget the other week that said, when God is the problem, only God can be the solution, talking about God stepping out of himself and taking on that wrath of himself on the cross.
Yeah.
And he's so true. When the problem or when the thing is from God, only God can resolve that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking about that, and just all of this stuff leading up to this week, and looking at my own faith and saying, you know what, am I still just like those that are hiding and doubting and waiting, or am I doing something about this message? Am I doing something about, like you said, if we know what the message is, but the bad thing is even though we know what the message is, what are we doing about that message? Mm-hmm. We know leading up to this time of the year is about the resurrection. We know it is about Jesus' death on the cross. We know it is about the hope that we have in salvation. And you'd think by now, if it's the same message year after year, I say same message, the same theme, the same topic, you'd think we'd start changing on what we do with it.
Yeah.
But I think if not careful, what tends to happen is we check the event off, we hang up the nice Easter suit and dress and all that stuff, and then Monday rolls around and we go back into just our regular routine of the year.
Yeah.
And it really is that challenge, I believe, of, well, what are we doing with it? What are we taking it out there to people? If we know why Easter is such a hope for us as Christians, what are we doing to share that hope?
Yeah.
What are we doing to get out there and let others know what that hope can do for them?
Yeah. And even kind of going back a little bit, something that I don't think necessarily I had a revelation on, but the fact that, we do know what the end of the story is.
Yeah.
We do know that, Peter goes on and preaches Pentecost, and, we know Thomas doubts and then sees Jesus, and we have all of these things, and I think sometimes we forget as Christians what it was like reading the Bible for the first time, of us saying, I don't know what the answer is here, but I'm going to continue going. And a lot of times in our life, we say what great faith these guys had or what little faith these guys have, and then we have hardship and trials come in our life, and we say, what's next? And really, if we're looking back on, if somebody's reading a book on your life one day, where are they going to look and say, man, that person should have had more faith because, right around the corner they were good.
Yeah.
Or, man, that person didn't have enough faith, and had they just stuck out just a little bit more. And I don't want us to get away from the fact of being a first-time Bible reader, of not knowing what the answers are. Sometimes I do wish that, we have Bible trivia sometimes, and some of the people get all the answers right, and it's a good thing, but at the same time you lose that question mark, or you lose that I don't have it all figured out, but I know I can find it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a sobering reality sometimes whenever I'm reading, of really not just putting yourself in their shoes, but also putting someone else in your shoes, of saying, okay, I know how I have this bill coming up and I don't know how I'm going to pay it. If ever someone read my story, they're going to see what faith I had or what little faith I had.
Yeah.
And really kind of comparing it that way. But at the same time, we get recharged at Easter to go out and do what Christ commands us to do.
Yeah.
There's the Great Commission and there's the Great Commandment. The Great Commandment being love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is like unto it, to love thy neighbor as thyself. And the Great Commission being go and preach the gospel, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And I don't think you can do the Great... I think you can do the Great Commission without the Great Commandment, but you can't do the Great Commandment without the Great Commission.
Yeah.
Meaning you can't love people and not tell them about a place they don't have to go to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget that Easter is a celebration time for us Christians, and it's a hopeful time for us Christians, but at the same time, we also have a duty to go out and spread the gospel of what Christ has done. Our faith doesn't end at the resurrection. It begins at the resurrection. Now, sometimes we think of, and I'm even guilty of it, of putting the resurrection as the end. Close the book, the end.
Yeah.
When in reality, it was, the footnotes to the beginning.
Yeah.
And we don't as Christians live the life we should live if we truly believe what all Christ did for us when he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
We have the joy of excuse me. We have our joy of salvation, but there's people out there that don't have any joy.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a difficult thing for us to share the gospel, but I think sometimes we have almost put it on the back burner of getting away from the significance of what actually it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people today, or a lot of people yesterday on Easter, accepted Christ as salvation. That wasn't the end. That wasn't the end of something dying, but it was the beginning of something living. And
absolutely,
I think a lot of times, kind of getting off topic on topic, we forget what Easter really is, and it's the beginning, not the end.
Yeah.
He didn't come live a sinless, perfect life, do what he did, go through what he went through to be crucified and raised from the dead for us to continue living whatever way we want to live, or continue not telling people about the gospel.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's all about Jesus, all about the gospel. And, that's kind of been my heart this past week, of really thinking about Easter. And, I'm guilty of it. Really, when it comes down to Easter being, in my mind, sometimes the finish line.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. That's what he came to do, what he was going to do.
Yeah. And
forgetting that it was just the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that, of course, us not having notes, us being on whatever track we're going to be on today, kind of been what my heart has been. But then we kind of get into, I like to look at things as a tree and kind of say, okay, what's the root of that? And then what's the branch off of that?
Yeah.
What's the branch off of that? And then we really see the disciples getting into, and I think you even had some verses for it, even leaving, going to the upper room, being fearful of what's happening, because to them it was the end.
Yeah.
To them, we had followed this man. We had seen him do great things. We remembered some of the stuff that he said.
Yeah.
And then, now we're back to what do we do?
Yeah.
We have sold out for this, and now it feels like we're at a loss. What do we do? How do you live the Christian life when you feel like this is the finish line?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, that's and what you're talking about with those. I mean, that's the thing. Those whirlwind of emotions of what they're going through, in this time, and that's what I was talking about earlier. I don't know if I would have had any different than what they were going through. I mean, like you said, to literally watch this one that they had followed, be crucified on the cross. And to that day, I'll say it like this, not to make light of it, crucifixions had a perfect record. Nobody had ever gotten up.
Yeah.
Everybody that had ever been crucified on a cross was still in a grave.
Yeah.
And so, it had a pretty proven track record of being effective. And
well, too, you think about how, kind of even going off that, you think of them seeing what, we were kind of talking about that even in Sunday school of, the Passion of the Christ and their depiction of what Jesus looked like. Him being beaten to the point where no one could recognize him was so brutal, to the fact of like, if that's what they did to him, what would they do to me?
Yeah.
And really even thinking about that of they have lost their hope.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have really and truly lost their purpose of saying, what am I here for? But seeing, the Romans were really good at their job.
Yeah.
And, I don't think there's any good depiction that we have where Christ is truly seen as what really and truly happened that day.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes down to them believing what they saw.
Yeah.
And kind of going off of that was the end. Nobody should be able to come back from that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, everybody, I don't know anybody that wouldn't have felt that very same way. And here's the thing, that same feeling still at times echoes in a Christian's life, of the what ifs, of is this really true? I've talked with teens in recent years of getting hung up on the cross, getting hung up on, did he really do what he said he was going to do, And so it's one of those things, it's not something that really has ended there. It's something that still echoes today, and I think we all can at times have those moments of, whether it's somebody wondering about, did Jesus really do what he said he was going to do, or is God able to do something in our life, or whatever it may be. We all can have those what if moments of that fear, of that losing hope in times and things like that. Losing hope of is Jesus able to do this in my life? Is Jesus able to work through this situation? Is Jesus able to help me out in this or get me through this? I think it all, again, is just this ripple effect of if there's doubt there and a loss of hope there, we can experience that same thing today. And, it's those things of what do we do, with those moments. It's like, again, yesterday and talking about Easter and all this stuff, we all heard that message. We all heard what Christ did. We all have probably, most of us heard it many times, in our lifetime. I know I grew up in church, and so I have heard my share of Easter messages.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in any light way or like I'm over them or anything like that. But, what am I choosing to do with that hope that I have? Am I going to take it into a room somewhere and hide and wonder what could happen and things like that? Or am I willing to take that hope to other people? Because here's the thing, if I can have my moments in my Christian life, what kind of moments do people experience without knowing Christ, without having Him as their Lord and Savior, without having salvation in their life? What are the things that they could struggle with? What is the hope that they're looking for? And we have that hope. We have that hope inside of us. And so really it's as we get to the other end or the other side of that coin of Easter, and we're at the first of the week and all of that stuff, like you said, one of the things you see later on, through the accounts of the Gospels and things like that, is Christ standing before His disciples and saying, look, all right, here is your hope again.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
You thought you lost it. I've shown you I'm still here. What are we going to do with that hope? And that's where He looks at him and says, look, you need to take that hope into the world. You need to take that hope out there and let people know about it, and go anywhere and everywhere that you can and share that gospel and share that hope with people, so that they too can know what I can do for their life, you know? And really, I think that's what has kind of hit me this past week and again is, Lord, don't let it be just another calendar event. Don't let it be just another Sunday.
Yeah.
Don't let it be just another resurrection message that I hear, or Easter message that I hear. And like you said, don't let it be the finish line. It's amazing how we're supposed to be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, and we still treat it as if it's a memorial service that He's still in the grave.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're not doing anything with it.
Yeah. That's good.
And so it's like, okay, if we're celebrating His resurrection, this ain't a in memory of service. No, this is something that is supposed to re-energize us and say, hey, look, let's take this hope out there to others.
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I doing to go share that hope? What am I doing to take that gospel out there to people that need to know it, that need to know that, for everybody that wondered why I was in church on Easter, and for everybody that wondered why I got so excited this past week because of the resurrection of Christ, why am I that way? Well, let me tell you why, you know. And it's, what are we doing to share that hope with others, to encourage them, to let them know what Jesus Christ can do for their life. And that's, I don't know, that's, like I said, as we're talking about things that just kind of hit us, is just something that has challenged me this week, because it's so easy, like you said, to just get into it. Well, it's another resurrection message. It's another sermon that we've heard about Jesus. It's another this, and just kind of take down the notes, and it sounds good, but we file it away in our Bible notebook, and then what else are we doing with it?
Yeah. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is when Jesus' time on earth is coming to an end, and He's really sitting there, and He says, I'm going to leave you, but when I leave you, I'm not going to leave you comfortless.
Yeah.
And we really see the first signs of Christ ascending and the Holy Spirit descending, and giving people that hope inside of them.
Yeah.
And a prayer that I often have in my life, and oftentimes for other people, is as simple as, Lord, you said if you'd leave us, you wouldn't leave us comfortless.
Yeah.
And Father, we're just searching for comfort.
Yeah.
And we have peace through Christ that no drug or alcohol can give you. And we have that so sure in our lives, but yet we're so slow to extend that offer to someone else. And really that thought of, it's easy for me to not disregard the resurrection, but easy for me to disassociate myself with it whenever I look at it as the finish line. And I look at this as saying, this is the end for the Christian, But again, back to the reality of it is, it was the beginning of this new hope that we have.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, there's a lot of different things we could talk about in Easter. You can talk about the time leading up in the Last Supper. Of course, a lot of people, I'm sure, took communion on Easter, and kind of what all that represents. And again, we don't know. We know what the end of the story is. We know that they don't know what the end of the story is. And as they're sitting there at the Last Supper, of what all that entails, of Christ saying, I'm giving myself. There's so much you can look at in Easter. A few weeks ago, we were talking about, the Bible talks about, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death passed upon all men, for all have sinned. And something I had really been studying out being Adam's sin entering into the world. And the Bible says in Hebrews, one man's disobedience, many were made sinners, but by one man's obedience, many were made righteous. And started really digging into that, of really Jesus being in the garden saying, Lord, if there's any other way we can do this, let's do it that way.
Yeah.
But then he kind of reels in and says, not my will, but thine be done. In that moment, it was the obedience, setting people free. It was that moment of saying, okay, it's not my will, it's your will. And of course, like Dr. Hurt was talking about, when Christ being fair, and people talk about, well, why didn't God just wipe Adam and Eve off and start fresh? Well, because eventually there would have been a little Justice or a little Bobby come along, and we would have been the ones to screw it up.
Same thing.
So, Christ has to be fair, and for him to just scratch it and say, well, we'll try this again, wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
And so Christ having to look at saying, okay, what is going to be able to appease this sin? And that's why we see in Isaiah, whenever he talks about it pleased the Lord for them to bruise him, and by his stripes we are healed. Really, because what Christ took on the cross wasn't them beating Christ, but it was them beating sin. And it was the Father turning his back on the Son, not because of who Christ was, but what Christ was taking on.
Yeah.
And the resurrection of saying, Christ became, he who knew no sin became sin for us, of him laying down his life and laying down that sin debt, and then picking himself up, of saying, I'm still God, and still being able to show Peter in the upper room, his hands that hadn't calloused over, his wounds that were still fresh, of saying, this is what I did for you. And again, we look at the whole story of Christ, of what all he did and what all he went through, and then we hit the finish line. It's like, this is it.
Yeah.
And when he, in reality, was just taking and passing that baton and saying, here, you run until you can't anymore. And like Paul talks about, him running this race until finally your time has come and you pass that baton, and you've passed it to someone who you have been training to continue on doing what you have been doing. Yeah. Everybody's mission on this earth is to live, share the gospel, be forgotten, and to continue that message of the gospel going on. Yeah. It's not a life for you to live where you leave a legacy, but it's a life for you to live for Christ. And kind of going back to why would Christ do everything that he did for us to sit on a church pew and just remember the good times?
Yeah.
And, again, he didn't wipe Adam and Eve off, not only because it wasn't fair, but because he still longed for that fellowship with them.
Yeah.
And, there was a message I heard a long time ago that was talking about angels and saying there was nothing that There's nothing that we can do that Christ couldn't have made an angel for and just gotten it done.
Yeah.
But the reality is he's longing for that fellowship with you. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Christ doesn't want you to do anything for him, but he wants to do something through you.
Yeah.
And living that life where I want to fellowship with Christ is why he didn't destroy Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
But why he said, I still long for that fellowship to where there's a problem and I'm going to have to be the solution. And really taking on that sin and saying, this is the once and for all that whosoever, I died for everybody.
Yeah.
And whoever accepts this free gift can spend eternity in heaven. And again, I know this is a lot talking about in Easter, but we lose the reality sometimes that you could pay your own sin debt. You 100%. It wasn't that Christ paid a debt you could never repay. You could pay your sin debt, but you paying your sin debt would have been spending an eternity in hell.
Yeah.
There was no way for you to get to the Father but through Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we take that for granted we count this as the finish line because I've gotten saved, that's all you do. When in reality it's the beginning of something new.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at it as, I've gotten saved, I got baptized, and I go to church, we've missed the point that Christ came for. And at the same time, we've done exactly what Satan has wanted us to do. There's a joy, I think, that there's a joy that this world and Satan, I believe, gets from seeing people that know the truth and don't share it.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what he's after.
Yeah.
Is just silencing the people that know what needs to be said. And there's 100 different, like I said, there's 100 different ways we could go into the Easter thought. But we can't treat it like the finish line.
Yeah.
We have to treat it as the starting point of saying, now I'm going to run as far and as fast and as well as I can.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm coming down to my last days, I'm saying, I have ran my race.
Yeah.
I have finished my course. And again, like Paul says, I've kept the faith.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to be able to say when my time is.
Yeah.
Of I kept the faith.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. One of the beauties of the cross, well, all of it, Easter and everything, is it was really that moment where we see our involvement in things. From the cross, coming into salvation, and then especially into the Great Commission, it's the beauty of it is that we see that moment of God doesn't need us, but he wants us.
Yeah. And
because that's the thing. The gospel in only a God way could be spread to this world. If it truly and honestly. Yeah. I've shared that with our Bible class before. I read a story of a guy that was a land developer, and he was driving a bulldozer, bulldozing trees, and he bulldozed a nest out of a tree, and it had a piece of a gospel tract on it, and he read it and got saved. God doesn't need us, but God wants us. Mm-hmm. And really, we see the beauty in the cross of Jesus taking that sin that, like you said, we could have paid. We could have paid that debt, but we know where it would have landed us, eternity in hell. But took on that sin to allow us access to the Father so that now we have a means of being able to do something for him and share that gospel with him. And, of course, again, we see him talk to the disciples. And really, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to this is just a reminder of the start.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we come around to Easter time and things like that, it's just a reminder of really the start of that race of what God's called us to do.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a video one time of a well-known atheist. His name Penn Jillette, and of Penn and Teller. I don't know if you remember them, magicians and all that. And he's very well known. I mean, has episodes out there of why he doesn't believe in the Bible and all this stuff. And he talked about he got to the end of a show one night, and a guy was standing there, and he recognized the guy. He was at an episode or a show the night before, and he said the guy come back that next day, and he had a Bible in his hands, and he said, "Look," he's like, for what it's worth, he said, "I just want to let you know I've been praying for you, and I just want to give you this Bible." And Penn said, he said, "I'm not the biggest fan of that." He said, "But I could tell this guy was genuine. Like, he was genuinely concerned for my soul of whether or not I knew Jesus Christ." And he said this phrase, I'll never forget an atheist saying this. He said, "How much?" He said, "If you believe in the gospel," he said, "I don't, but if you do," he said, "I look at that as like me walking on a set of train tracks." And he said, if I have convinced myself that there's no train coming, but you see that train coming, he said, "How much would you have to hate me to not pull me off the tracks?"
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Whether I acknowledge that there's a train there or not, if you see one, you believe one's there, how much would you have to hate me to not pull me off the tracks?"
Yeah.
And here is an atheist calling out Christians of saying, "Hey, look, if you believe it,"
Yeah.
and he said that. He said, "Look, I'm not for witnessing and all that stuff, but if you're going to do it," he said, if you're going to claim it, then love people enough to do it."
Yeah.
And that's really where we're at with all of this, of Easter and the gospel and what Christ did on the cross and the commission and all these things, the great commandment, all of these things boils down to that of, do we love people enough
Yeah.
to share that hope with people?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, did we get a good enough reminder this past week of really what Christ did for us? Enough to let it not be just another calendar day, just another time when we buy the nice suits and the nice dresses and take the nice family pictures. Is it enough of a reminder to let us realize, you know what, I do have hope, and this ain't where it ends, but this is where it starts, and I need to get busy sharing that gospel with other people, because guess what, I do love people, and God loved me enough to send his son to die on a cross. I need to show others what that looks like in this life. And man, that hit me like a ton of bricks when he said that. But it has been a reminder countless times of, like you said earlier, that commission and that commandment, how they go hand in hand, and the love we show others because of the love that God showed us first.
Yeah.
And what are we doing with it?
We see, kind of even something I talked about a little bit ago with, if somebody ever reads our story, where will they see us fail in faith, and where will they see us excel in faith? But the reality is somewhere in that story, somebody shared the gospel with you.
Yeah.
And, I like to think that somewhere in somebody's story, they might say, I have no idea who it was. I don't know what their name was or where they were from, but someone shared the gospel with me.
Yeah.
And, no one, everyone deserves an eternity in hell.
Yeah.
But Christ made a way when there was no way. And that's worth sharing the gospel with somebody about.
Absolutely.
Be someone this week. I'm going to challenge myself. Be somebody this week that shares the gospel to where you might hand them a track. You might be uncomfortable. But don't treat the resurrection as the finish line.
Yeah.
But treat it as the start of saying, I'm going to, between this Easter and next Easter, share the gospel with whoever the Lord puts in my path. And you don't have to look very hard for people in need. Oftentimes you just have to look around.
Yeah.
And I think us coming out of our shell a little bit of, if you truly believe that Christ saved you,
yeah,
why wouldn't you want to share that with someone else?
absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
a good reminder this week as we kind of wrap up this episode of who in your life needs to hear the good news that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all, we have a hope. We have one of the best hopes we know of in this world, of a gospel, of a love, of a salvation that can change people's lives. Big question is what are we willing to do with it? You heard the messages. We know what Easter's all about. We know what Christ did on the cross. Hey, let's get busy with it. Let's get out there. Let's share that hope with others. And if you have a hope inside of you, others deserve to know that hope as well. So, guys, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Hope this has been just a little reminder, a little challenge of what God did for us so long ago. We appreciate y'all.
Finish well. Appreciate y'all.